All right, awesome. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. And so we're going to talk about getting started with your data science career, which is something that I am so incredibly passionate about. And so if you could just, in the chat, let me know the number of years experience that you have, and also comment how much time you've spent learning data science. That'll help give me a little bit of context of just how long you've been doing this for. All right, so I see 1 month, 6 months, 3 years, junior analyst, fresher, 8 months. All right. Okay, awesome. Awesome. 2 years of experience in IT. Oh, there's a lot of people on. This is great. Okay, so let's get started. So first, we're going to be covering what the minimum skills are that you need to be able to land a job in data science. And, if you have those skills, how you want to be using LinkedIn effectively so that it can help you in your career search. I'll share a couple of tips about your resume and making sure that the resume that you send in is going to make an impact. And then we'll talk about interviews, and once you get that offer, a couple of tips on how to negotiate that offer for more money, which I really like to add, because not everyone negotiates their offers, but you should be, and it's not as scary as you think it is. All right, so we will just jump right in. So the baseline skills required, and we're going to go through each of these, but you typically need a qualitative degree, and we'll talk about this in 2 seconds, Python or R. It's nice to know both, but really you just need to get started with one. An understanding of the baseline algorithms. So, we talk about a lot of deep learning and AI, but at the end of the day, knowing regression, classification, clustering is going to be that foundation that's really important for getting in the door. Like, you can get in the door with that. We'll talk about data analysis and data cleaning, and almost most importantly, having a good attitude. So baseline skills required, a quantitative degree. This is necessary because in a quantitative degree, you're going to cover calculus. Whether it's engineering or physics or mathematics or computer science, there are these baseline things that you learn that are really foundational to understanding data science. And so if somebody has a degree in another field, like this person who just commented and said that they have an MBA and 5 years of experience, am I too old to start a career in data science? No, you're not. And if you have a degree and experience and you learn, you're able to pivot over to data science. But I have seen people say that they don't have a degree, they don't have a bachelor's degree at all, and they'd like to get into data science. And that would be incredibly difficult, because unfortunately, the world that we live in right now does look for degrees on your resume, and they're particularly looking for quantitative degrees unless you have a fair amount of experience to back it up. And so somebody just asked about what level of calculus. So, I mean, it depends on what area of data science you're going into. For, marketing data science, probably just calculus 1. If you're going into deeper fields, you probably want to have an understanding of multivariate calculus. So in addition to having a degree, and preferably a quantitative degree, you also want to know either Python or R. Recently, I'm seeing more job postings that require Python and maybe aren't mentioning R. I also see tons of job descriptions that will ask for either Python or R. I personally use both. And if I would suggest just picking one tool, and because I'm seeing more job postings in Python, I'd probably recommend Python because that just seems to be where the market might be going. But you need to be able to analyze data and automate processes that's not using Excel, right? Because Excel isn't going to be, you're not going to be able to version control with it like using Git and GitHub. And so you'll want to learn one of these tools. That doesn't mean that you need to be a professional. I'm not a software developer. My background is in mathematics and statistics, and I have learned programming. So, you know, it's one of those things that you need to be able to write loops and be able to set up a connection to the database, pull your data in, and be able to manipulate that in a way that's going to allow you to use machine learning algorithms. And these packages for machine learning algorithms are going to be in Python or R. So somebody asked, is Excel not required? So you can live without Excel. Is it a nice to have? Sure, I wouldn't focus on that. And somebody else asked, in the age of neural networks, are traditional machine learning algorithms required to be learned? If yes, why? So that's my next slide. So regression, classification, clustering, and the application of those is absolutely the baseline. We talk about neural networks, but in industry, the majority of companies are using things like, well, so first of all, right now I'm working on a large cluster analysis so that the business can have a better understanding of who their customers are and what differentiates them so that they can talk to them in a tailored way. And at the same time, regression, right? Logistic regression is used in just so many things, right? I want to stress that we talk a lot about neural networks, but at the end of the day, logistic regression is probably what you're going to be using for your retention models, for your acquisition models, to understand your customers and optimize the business. Same with classification. So, you know, I could use logistic regression for a retention or an acquisition model. I could also use classification for an acquisition model and say, okay, I want to understand where my ad spend should be going. And so, you know, I want the outcome variable to be whether, you know, maybe how much the people are worth to us or how likely they are to convert. And I'm going to use variables on their demographics and things that I'm able to target through Facebook ads, which would be, you know, like people's zip code, where they live, and different things like that, and see if I can target my ad spend to certain locations and certain factors and be able to optimize that. So I haven't really seen any job descriptions that don't say regression, classification, or clustering on them. Like, it's absolutely baseline. Right, so neural networks can also help classify customers. It's just the state of the data and where companies are right now, and we're talking about how to get into data science and, you know, getting in, I think that these are absolutely the baseline, and it's what, so are other people having difficulty hearing me? Because somebody said there's a sound problem. But yeah, so, okay, great. So people are saying they can hear me. You know, I don't see a ton of job postings unless you're going for an AI position that are saying, you know, we want neural networks, but we don't care about regression, classification, and clustering. And you know, in the next couple years, maybe that'll move. But if you're trying to get a job right now, like, these are skills that you want to have. You obviously need to understand data analysis and data cleaning. So this is, so somebody asked, deep learning also comes in data science. Yes, so I'd consider that to be still under the umbrella of data science. I've built neural network models to forecast hourly electric load, and it was incredibly useful in the business for determining when they should move capacity so that everyone's lights stay on. And of course, there is a non-linear relationship between the weather and the amount of electricity that people are using. So there's times where you're going to use these things. This isn't you know, hard and fast rules. But I'd say one of the most important baseline skills required is a good attitude, because people always ask me, hey, what's the one thing I can do to really wow people in an interview? And my answer to that is always, you want to be somebody that I'd want to work 40 hours a week with. And this is what, you know, your hiring manager is thinking when you're coming in there and you're interviewing. They're asking themselves, like, okay, they need to have this baseline set of skills that meets the requirements for the job. But in addition, we also want to make sure that we want to work with you. Like, that's the most important thing. We spend a ton of time together. And then somebody just asked, are SAS and SQL required? So, huge oversight on my slides. I think SQL is the most important tool that you can have. You don't need to have SAS. I have coded in SAS before. I would prefer not to work for somebody who is using SAS. I'd call that a SAS shop, because I think that the industry is moving towards open source tools, and SAS will be useful to you, especially if you want to go into the health industry or into bio and do data science there. But if you're outside of that realm, you probably want to stick to open source. And so back to, sorry, I'm a little all over the place because I'm trying to take people's feedback as we're going. But so for SQL, I'd say, yes, understanding MySQL or Postgres, you can pick any SQL, any flavor of SQL. And so I personally have experience with MySQL and Postgres. So if somebody puts SQL on a job description or a particular type of SQL, I'm still going to apply to that because there's so many commonalities that I'm not worried about being able to pick that up. Okay, so let's move on and talk about leveraging LinkedIn. I've seen a lot of people message me on LinkedIn and say, hey, take a look at my profile and let me know if you have a job available for me. And this is not going to work. So, you actually need to go about it from the opposite side. You need to look at the jobs that you want to get and read the job description. And then you go to LinkedIn and you find somebody who works at that company and their title is either director of data science or VP of data science. You want to talk to somebody who you think is the decision maker, and you need to use your discretion here. If it's a really large company, it's going to be more difficult to find the appropriate person, but you want to go after somebody who you think might actually be in the department that you'd be working in if you were to work there. So it is impossible to say that you are a right fit for the position if you haven't checked if there's a position available. I get these messages on LinkedIn and it's like, go check my profile. If you have any openings, I'm sure I'd be a great fit and add a lot of value to your organization. And it's like, well, there's a ton of different types of data science work. And so if you don't know what the needs are by seeing a job description, how can you say that you'd be able to meet those needs? You don't know, right? So that's the quickest way to get passed over and letting your message go nowhere. But some tips for writing a well-composed message would be to start with something conversational, because these people that you're messaging, they might get a lot of messages on LinkedIn. And just because you're reaching out on LinkedIn does not mean not to apply on the website. You have to apply on the website in addition, because these people may or may not get back to you. You don't know. So you need to do both. But if you can find something like, hey, I liked your recent post on X, or I read this white paper on your website not your website, on the company website, and I thought that was fascinating work. And then talk about, hey, I noticed you had an open position. And you want to talk about your skills that you have that are on that job description. You don't, everything should be incredibly tailored, especially when you're going into somebody's inbox. And then you're gonna say, like, I'd love it if you could just forward my resume to the appropriate person, because you don't know, they might not be the appropriate person. And again, you want your closing to be that you're here to add value. Don't talk about your needs. Talk about how you can help the business. And again, like I've already said, don't tell somebody to go look at your profile, because they probably won't. That's extra work on them. You want to make everything very easy for them. You want to come across and you want to say, hey, I'm not cold messaging you. I looked at your profile. I know who you are. Don't say that, obviously. But that's like the message that you want to get across. So an example of something that I would send would literally look like, hey, I recently saw your post on, I don't know, some blog post you wrote, or something that you mentioned that was a cool initiative at their work, and I look forward to reading more of your post. I noticed that the company name is hiring for senior data scientist, and I'm hoping I can get my resume in the right hands. I have a master's degree plus 7 years of real world experience building models. I'm a whiz at SQL. See, it doesn't sound so overly professional. This is more personal. I'm coming across as likable. These things that I'm mentioning here are things that would have been on a job description that I would apply to. I wrote this a little while ago. That's why it says plus 7 years. But I'm I'm mentioning things that are on the job description. So it's like, they have this job description, they're looking for this person, and I'm basically saying like, hey, I'm that person. And then, I say I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with the appropriate person about the position and share how I've delivered insights and added value for companies through the use of statistical methods. You see, I'm not here saying that, a ton of stuff that isn't necessarily relevant. This is all stuff that would be relevant to the job description. It's quick, and it's got a call to action. It's saying, I'm looking to get my resume in the right hands. You want to make sure you have a call to action. And so somebody asked, is a master's always required? The answer is no. You can absolutely get in with a bachelor's degree. Sorry, I'm just reading some more of the chat. And so talking about resumes, right? So we've applied on we've reached out on LinkedIn, and we want to be able to apply on the website, but we need to make sure that our resume is something that is not only going to get through the door, but that it's going to wow people, right? And so the first step is getting it through the door. And what does that mean? So we have, in medium to large companies now, they're almost all using applicant tracking systems, which means to get your resume through and into somebody's hands, you have to be able to get past that applicant tracking system. And so things that I've seen, like tableauizing your resume or putting the little charts that talk about, it'll be like skills, and then it'll have SQL 5 stars, and Python 3 stars. That's not parsable by ATS. You also don't want any icons. So like, people put their LinkedIn and they'll put a LinkedIn icon, and that looks nice, but it's not going to be read by ATS correctly. So you actually want to use a boring classic resume because it works and it gets through the door. So like I said, you don't want to tableauize your resume, you don't want to put any charts on it, and you don't want any icons or logos. And then in addition, you want to make your resume rich with keywords. So that means that you don't want to be verbose. So you want the ratio of words that they're looking for, and the things that they're going to be, the words that they're going to be searching your resume for are going to be things like logistic regression, classification, clustering, Python, SQL, all the things that we just talked about. You want to make sure that the ratio of those things to the ratio of other words that you're using is higher, and so that you get a good score and your resume goes to the top of the list. And we cover this more in my course, which just launched today on analytics video, and we'll talk about that in a second. But more information, with resumes, you have to get past ATS and into a person's hands. And then once you're in a person's hands, what do we want to see? Just know that the top half of your resume is the most important. So you want to be thinking about the structure of your resume. If you have multiple years of experience, your education should be at the bottom. If you're brand new to the industry, then you'd want that education to be at the top, right? Because that's your most recent achievement. And so you want that at the top. I talk about in the course using a tagline instead of using a summary or an objective. Summaries can typically be long. And honestly, when a resume only gets between 6 and 30 seconds as a first glance on whether or not they're going to consider you more seriously or your resume is going to get passed through, you need to be able to get people's attention quickly. And so a summary can be long and it sort of lists everything that you've done, but it could be positioned better. And that's what I call the tagline. And in addition, some people put objectives on their resume. And I don't like an objective typically either, because an objective is talking about what you're hoping to get. And what we want to get across is what you can do for the business, right? We're not, I want a job in data science. Cool, I know you want a job in data science because you're applying to a data science position. But my tagline is, I'm a data scientist with 9 years experience, creating innovative and actionable machine learning solutions in business. And so that's quick, but I think I also say, I have demonstrated success partnering cross-functionally, which is something that is very important. A tagline allows you to speak to those soft skills, because you don't want to just put a soft skills section on your resume because it's words with no context. So somebody says like, I'm likable, like, okay, that's that doesn't actually mean anything. But so we talk a lot more about taglines in the Up-Level Your Resume course that is on Analytics Vidya. And of course, we always want to start bullets with a verb. We want to vary these verbs, and we want to end our bullets with a statement or about the result or the value. So like I was talking about previously with my neural net model, right? So the way that I'd position this on my resume was built. That's an action verb. Built neural net model to forecast hourly electric load. And I don't want to stop there, right? Because if I stop there, I wasn't talking about how that actually impacted the business. So I'd go on to say, this was imperative in managing capacity during heat waves or during peak load time. And so that value can always be it doesn't need to be that you increased sales by 3%, because sometimes those things are hard to quantify or find, but value that you've added could be as simple as, I created a dashboard and it removed me as a bottleneck to other stakeholders. And so you probably wouldn't use the word bottleneck, but you understand what I'm saying. If you automated a process and that saved people man hours, that's indirectly or directly saving the business money, right? And you can call those things out. And if you can't think of anything, you can even put like that you presented your results to leadership, because people want to see that you're able to present to leadership. And another thing, I actually just saw a resume 2 days ago that had, what was it? I don't remember, but it was similar to putting, that they were a swim coach on their resume. It had nothing to do with data science. And so those things do not need to be on your resume. You want to make sure that everything on your resume is relevant and targeted to getting a job in data science. And even the things now that I'm putting on my resume, so I spent a ton of time working on site tagging and implementing, writing up tagging requirements so that we could do analytics on the site. But I don't want to do tagging in my next job. So I removed those couple bullets from my resume. Even though I spent like 2 years doing that, I highlight and showcase different things, because at the end of the day, your resume is a marketing tool to get you a call. And then once you get that call, you need to keep the door open. And so, like I said, my Uplevel Your Data Science Resume course just went live today on the Analytics Video website, and I am incredibly excited about it. And so if you'd like to learn more tips, or actually if you'd like to completely restructure your resume, you can go and take this course, and it brings you through step by step. Okay, here we're going to talk about your header. Now we're going to talk about your tagline, and it has videos and all sorts of cheat sheets to help you completely update and transform your resume into one that businesses are going to notice when it comes through. So your resume gets you in the door, and then you have to start interviewing, right? And so the most common questions that you're going to see that you want to prepare for start with, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work for this company? And they're going to ask you in the phone screen about your salary requirements. And try and avoid this question if you can, because if you give a number, really what you want to do is see if you can get the person to tell you what the salary range is for the position, because you don't want to tell them that you'll work for less than what they were maybe thinking the band for that pay was. So typically when somebody says, and what are your salary requirements? I say something along the lines of, I've always been paid fairly. I assume you'd, pay me fairly as well. Do you have an idea of what the salary band is for this position? And a lot of times they're still going to push and try and get it out of you. And if you do give them your salary requirements, that doesn't mean that you can't negotiate later. You can still negotiate later, but it's not best case scenario for you to give them your salary for the reasons I just mentioned. And then, tell me about yourself. Really, like, this is something that you want to sit down and you want to write this out ahead of time. This is your tagline. This is your elevator pitch. Like, be prepared so that, because here somebody is just looking to see that you can speak about yourself and that you can carry a conversation. So tell me about yourself. I'm a data scientist. I'm super passionate about, pick your favorite algorithm, or, talk about a project that you had done, and then say, and I love, I just love playing with data and using it to get real world insights. But write it down ahead of time so that you're not caught off guard, because it seems like a simple question, and in your head you think you know yourself, but then you get asked the question and it can totally trip you up, and you don't know if you should go on talking for 3 minutes, or you start going down a road that you don't necessarily want to go down. Like, determine what your road is, and write it down. Spend some time thinking about, okay, what are the most important things that I want to get across when somebody asks me to tell them about myself, and stick to those things. And you may have 5 people ask you in an interview to tell me about yourself. You can give them all the same answer. They're not going to get back together afterwards and say oh, she said the same thing 6 times. Your answer is your answer. Why do you want to work for this company? I urge you to, before you go into an interview to look at the mission and the vision of the company. Because if you're going for an interview at Microsoft and they say, why do you want to work for company Microsoft? You can't say, because I love Windows. So because everyone uses Windows, and everyone, like that's not a unique answer. This is an opportunity for you to show that you've done some research. And so you could find on the website that maybe they have a new product launching and you're so interested in the implications that's going to have on, on their base, or you love that they value volunteer work, or some way that they're, you're passionate about their mission and vision, and you can just pick a piece or two out of their mission and say that that really resonates with you. If it does, like, we want to be honest here, but there's things that you can find that show that you're a much stronger candidate and that you understand the company than just like, oh, I like your product. You have to really understand the product and what the company stands for. So I'd suggest actually that you write these questions down. So these are the behavioral questions, and they are asked time and time again. I actually got these top 3 questions in one phone screen with a company. So tell me about a time you explained technical results to a non-technical audience. This is incredibly important. This is one of, the skills that they're really looking for is, okay, like, we understand you're really smart and you can do all these algorithms, but will you be able to communicate them to the business? And the way that I answer this question is I speak about a project that I did at Vistaprint. So this was also a cluster analysis. And, I talk about the number of, to the interviewer, I say, I had 54 variables. There was a lot of work that went into this with the data preparation and all the technical stuff. But when it came time to talk to the business, I talked about the size of the populations, the opportunity, and how we could message to these people differently that would make an impact. I also stressed the fact that my results were actionable, right? We're able to tag these people back in the database and drive campaigns based on this information. And that is how I explain technical results to a non-technical audience. So I always finish my answer by repeating the question. But you'll notice there that I specifically call out, like, okay, I give context. This was a project I worked at Vistaprint, and they sell marketing materials to small businesses. And then I talk about the project that I worked on. And then I say, but when it was time to speak to the stakeholders or the non-technical audience, I brought this up a level. And so you can research, this is the STAR format of answering questions, and you can just Google STAR format. And I urge you to, again, write out the answers to these top 3 questions ahead of time, because you're going to get these questions basically verbatim somewhere. Like, if you're interviewing multiple places, I promise you, you will come across these questions. And then, of course, you also need to be prepared to speak to the projects that are listed on your resume. If you put it on your resume, it is fair game. So make sure that you, before you go into the interview, you remember what the methodology you used there was, like specifics about it, and think about how you want to be able to talk to it and position it, because you're still marketing yourself. You're marketing yourself and your capabilities. I actually had an instance where, so my master's thesis is not on my resume, but it used it used Bayesian statistics. And so when I was asked in a interview if I had any experience with Bayesian, I mentioned my my thesis that I had written, and he started asking me questions about it, and I didn't have the answers. And so I told him that I would get back to him, and I did. You know, he asked me about the prior the prior distribution in my model. And I was like, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And I did go and get back to him, but that's not a position you want to put yourself in. Anything you bring up in the interview and anything that's on your resume, you want to be able to speak to it. So in the interview, you're also going to be expected, or most often, I've actually had interviews without a technical piece, but most interviews you will have a technical piece. And you may also have like a technical take home. So, and technical take homes are typically a lot more difficult to complete than in the interview, technical interview. So you could have a take home that's like, you know, a bunch of SQL questions, scraping web data, if that's going to be something that's used in your new job, and, you know, data cleaning in Python. And you could spend a lot of time on that, but at least you have the time. In an interview in-house, you don't have a ton of time. So typically what this looks like is, you know, they'll tell you about 2 tables, or they'll have, you know, paper printouts of 2 tables, and they'll put you on a whiteboard and they'll say, okay, you know, join these tables and give me back name, address, and whatever. And then it'll get, you know, it'll slowly build up, like to the point where you have to, you know, write a statement that has a select, you know, a couple joins, a where statement, a having statement, a group by, and typically they don't get too much more intense than that, just because of time, right? So you could have somebody who's really interested in knowing that you really know SQL, but typically, you know, you'll just get the questions that show that you have a baseline understanding, and then they'll move on. And then same with whiteboarding code. 2 days in a row, I was asked FizzBuzz, which is a question where, you know, you want to loop through numbers 1 to 100. When you get 3, it's got to output fizz. When it's a 5, you want to output buzz. And when it's a multiple of, so if it's a multiple of 3, fizz. If it's a multiple of 5, buzz. And if it's a multiple of 3 times 5, then you output fizz buzz. I was asked that same question twice. But in general, you want to be able to answer a question that may require defining a simple function, or you know, writing loops, using a try except statement, using an if then statement. You know, they'll ask you a question that will require you to use things that show that you just have a baseline understanding of Python, because again, we're not software engineers, but we have, you know, we have to show that we have the baseline understanding of coding, and that we have the aptitude to do more. And then they'll ask you some analysis or methodology interview questions. And so these are things like simple probability questions. You know, I have 2 dice, and, you know, something like that. Or, you know, if conversion went up on the site and revenue is down, what could have happened? And just like talk through the thoughts. And so those could be anything. A lot of times it could be specific to projects that they see are listed on your resume. And so they'll ask you a question about, you know, logistic regression methodology or classification methodology, just to make sure that the stuff that you have on your resume is stuff that you fully understand, and make sure that you have general ability to do analysis. And so, you're always going to, sorry, I'm just taking another look. What is, just taking another quick look at the webinar chat. So this Galaxy J7, this is being recorded. And so the link will be, oh, Pranav already answered that. So one of the most important parts of the interview as well is when they say, do you have any questions for me? And you don't want to say no, and you want this to be really well thought out. So questions that I personally love are, tell me about the behaviors of a person who would be considered a high-performing, high-potential employee. And so this is a roundabout way of me getting at, are you expecting me to work on nights and weekends? Because I have 2 children. That's not the type of culture that I'm looking for. But at the same time, I'm not saying, how hard do I have to work, right? I'm saying, tell me who a high-performing, high-potential employee is. And if they say, it's somebody who communicates really well, and keeps everybody in the loop and deliver results on time, that gives me the opportunity to say, like, wow, I am that, yes, absolutely. I do those things. And let me tell you about a time that I delivered results on time under pressure. Like it's a conversation starter. I like to ask what software they're using. And I typically actually like to ask that in the phone screen, because if you tell me that you're using SAS, I'm personally not going to pursue that job. There are people who code in SAS. There are people that love SAS. There are people that are looking for jobs in SAS. That's just not me. So I'm not saying that that's, what you need to do. I'm just saying that, the software that people are using is really important to me. If I applied to a data science role and then they said, actually, the majority of the role is in SQL and Excel, and they're not using Python or R, that also tells me something. That also tells me that, they're probably not at a place with their data that I want to, that this would be a company that I want to work at, and they have a long way to go before that they're doing, really cool things in Python and R. I also like to ask, is there anything else I can tell you about my skills and qualifications to let you know that I am a good fit for this job? This gives me one more chance. If there is something that they have on their mind that that I maybe haven't covered, or maybe they have some reservations, this gives me that opportunity to clear it up. And they say, yeah, you know what? I haven't heard you talk about, working with difficult stakeholders yet. Then I can say, okay, let me tell you about a time I worked with difficult stakeholders, and then say, is there anything else? Is there anything else I need to tell you about my skills and qualifications to let you know that, like, I could do a great job here. I always ask, when can I expect to hear from you? So that I have an idea of when I'm hearing, and it's not just like, that's literally for just my own purposes. I want to know when I expect to hear from somebody so that I know when to follow up. And I don't, follow up before that. Of course, I will be sending a thank you note as well. You always have to send thank you notes after every communication that you have. And then also, look up the business and think about the questions that you need to ask to get at the things that are important to you, and think about a diplomatic way to ask it, so that you have all the information that you need to make an informed decision. And so I see that timing is getting tight, and I did want to have the opportunity to take questions. So I'm just going to try and get through the rest of this really quickly. So multiple offers, right? Somebody calls you, they tell you that you're expecting an offer. Great. You say, thank you, I look forward to speaking with you. And then when you get off the phone, you need to make sure that you call all the other companies that you're talking to, that you would consider accepting an offer from, and let them know that you're accepting that you are expecting an offer, and is there anything that they can do to accelerate their process, because you'd like to be able to consider an offer from them as well. And so that means no hiring manager wants to hear from you, oh, I'm removing my candidacy because I accepted an offer. No, give all those companies an opportunity to speed up if they see fit, if they want to pursue that, and give them the opportunity to speed up a bit, get you in there and make an offer so that you have multiple offers to consider. And then on negotiating, this is really quick, but you know, negotiating is, they're going to call you and they're going to say, we'd like to make you an offer after they said, we're going to give you an offer. We're putting it together. Okay, wonderful. I look forward to speaking with you. Then, 4 days later, they call up and they say, okay, we have prepared an offer for you. Is this something that you'd like to hear? Yes, I would. And they will tell you about the offer. And then you say, thank you so much. I appreciate this. I was hoping that you could do more on the salary. And then just stop talking. Let them answer the question. And don't say, oh, I was hoping that, it would be $5,000 higher, because actually the last time I negotiated, I got more than $5,000. So I'm very happy that I didn't solve the problem for them. I didn't give them a concrete number. Just stop talking. And they will say something like, okay, I need to go back and talk to the hiring manager, and then I will get back to you. And you say, great, I look forward to hearing back from you. I'll take some time to look over the benefits package that you sent over. How about we speak again on Tuesday? I'm feeling confident we can close this. And that's everything was kept positive. And you still asked for more money. You'll notice in that script, everything was incredibly positive, and I was appreciative of their offer. But I was also seeing if there was anything that they could do in terms of salary. So thank you so much. I hope some of these tips were helpful. I realized I put way too much information trying to squeeze it into a 1-hour webinar. But more information is better than less. This is where you can find me, and I am going to look at the Q&A now. And so we have a couple minutes for questions if you guys want to come in and start asking some questions. Okay, so somebody asked, how do you get specific domain knowledge? So the thing is it's hard to get specific domain knowledge without actually working in the domain. But what you can do as a fresher is, research what analytics for different industries looks like. So if it's in e-commerce, just like Google what e-commerce analytics focuses on, or the types of problems that they are answering, or the problems that they're facing, and just be able to speak intelligently to it. Like, you don't want to make it sound like you know everything, but just that you're curious enough, and that you have an interest, and you at least have some understanding of their domain. Can an academician with 12 years of experience and no industry experience, but with a computer science degree, become a data science and enter the industry? Yes, I actually just worked with somebody who who had a PhD. They had a tremendous amount of experience, but no real applied industry experience, and they just accepted a position. And so it is possible. You need to think about your positioning. And I know in academia, you guys do CVs instead of resumes. Like, you really want to work to get your down to a 1-page resume, and don't put, online courses on there, like the massive online courses like Coursera. I see people mentioning those to show that they're taking initiative, but unfortunately in industry, those aren't really very well respected. And so you want to be able to talk to the projects that you did in there and the things that you learned, like where you place your technical skills, say, regression, and maybe put a project that you did with regression on your resume, but don't list like Data Camp or Coursera or whatever on your resume. It's all about strategic positioning. Yeah, somebody's asking if they can, make the hop over to data science with traditional software engineering. Yes, like get an understanding of, in analysis and some machine learning algorithms. And that's like the best. I get that question all the time. And somebody who is a software developer, I think across the board, everyone knows that they'd make a fantastic data scientist if they tried to make the hop. Do we need to prep data structures for the interview? I mean, yeah, like, because depending on the question that you're asked to whiteboard, you want to make sure that your code would work and that the data structures would be appropriate. Anything's fair game. Some positions are a little bit more production level code. Some positions are a little bit less on production level code. And it's really so, it's applying to a lot of places. Make sure you're applying to like 20 places a week. And if you can't find 20 positions to apply to, you probably want to broaden your search. But it's through the applying, that's a feedback loop, right? So you get more information on what you need to know. And if you go into your first in-person interview and they ask you some crazy questions that like you have no idea what the answer is to, do not get discouraged, because there's other companies and other interviews and they're not all the same. How important is statistics for learning machine learning and neural networks? Well, I'm a person with a master's degree in statistics, so personally, I think it's very important. Logistic regression, regression is statistics. It's applied statistics. Okay, so I have time I'll take 2 more questions. I don't have time for them, but I'll take them anyways. Do Kaggle projects help? Yes, absolutely, because it's a project that, well written, can look great on your resume and help you get in the door. And especially if you rank well and you're sharing that information on LinkedIn, like that can help you get noticed. What's my opinion on freelance data science? I mean, if you have the opportunity to freelance, I'd go for it. I personally haven't really freelanced, and I don't have time to freelance, so it's not something that I know a ton about. Okay, so this is, wow, there's a lot of questions here, but at the same time, it is after 10 o'clock, so we do need to close this off, but definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, and maybe I can work with Pranav to set up another future session or something. And so Pranav, I will hand this over to you. And, I just want everyone on here to know that I'm really so grateful that you joined me today, and I hope that this was helpful.